Our next speaker, I actually wanted to mention a connection, and Lisa Gordon, who is unfortunately not feeling well, so she couldn't be here today, but Lisa spoke at the part one briefing back in October. She's with Bank Street College of Education, and actually was very instrumental in bringing two of our speakers, Charles, and our next speaker, Principal Eric Bethel, to the briefing today. So she will see this video eventually, and I want to thank her. So our next speaker is Principal Eric Bethel. He is a native Washingtonian. He attended Mount St. Mary's College for both undergraduate and graduate school, earning a BA in sociology and a master's in elementary education. This is his 14th year in education, all serving students in the District of Columbia public school system. He spent his first 8 years teaching 3rd through 5th grade at Marie Reed Elementary School. And in the summer of 2010, he was awarded a fellowship to work in the DCPS Central Office as a Teacher Central to Leadership Fellow. This experience broadened his perspective on education reform and led to him serving DCPS students and teachers in a variety of capacities, including master educator, assistant principal, and now principal of Turner Elementary School. And for those of you who are at the first briefing, Lisa spoke about a program that's been piloted at some DC public schools, including Turner. And so I hope that Principal Bethel will have a moment to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you, Brandon, and good afternoon, everyone. I stand before you as the proud principal of Turner Elementary School, a pre-K to 5th grade campus that is housed in a beautifully modernized facility, though nestled in the Congress Heights neighborhood in Ward 8 Southeast. This is a neighborhood that is amongst some of the highest rates of poverty and crime in our beautiful nation's capital. Turner is one of DC Public Schools Chancellor Henderson's targeted 40 schools, which simply means we're one of the lowest 40 performing schools in DCPS. If there were a targeted 10 list based on student achievement metrics, we would be on that list. With over the past 2 years, students are performing at 1% proficiency levels on a state standardized test. Even more compelling of a data point is that 60% of the students performed at the lowest of 5 levels on that same performance metric. Nearly 2 years ago, Chancellor Henderson tapped me and asked me, was I up for a challenge? I told her absolutely, and since then I've been the principal at Turner, charged with leading a school-wide transformation. In the 2 years that I've been leading this effort, a lot has been uncovered in terms of the challenges. Some of the challenges include attracting and retaining teacher talent. It includes engaging families effectively, providing the right academic interventions for elementary school students who are already at a deficit, 1, 2, 3 grade levels behind, and you're just at 3rd or 4th grade. But none of those challenges has been more layered or more compelling, or I feel demanding of more of an immediate response than what we're learning about the impact of stress and trauma associated with poverty on students' mental health, their brain development, their readiness to learn, their social and emotional dispositions and behavior. It's absolutely striking what we see on the ground as stress and trauma plays out on children's lives. Here's a little bit of what we see. So actually, let me take a step back and explain a little bit about what are some of these stressors that we've identified that students have. On a very basic level, the basic human needs, some of the stress that come to my students at Turner really revolve around simple eating habits. For both you and I, you have control over when you're going to eat. You're probably on some sort of routine. I know my son, who's 3.5, eats every single evening, pretty balanced meal most of the time at about 7 o'clock. But for lots of my students that live in poverty, they're not quite sure when they're going to eat, or what they're going to eat, or how they're going to eat. That is stressful. That level of stress has an impact on their brain development, on their executive functioning, and it plays out in their opportunity to engage in instruction in the school environment. Other simple aspects of life. Sleep. Am I sleeping? Which house am I sleeping at tonight? Do I have a bed tonight? Am I sharing that bed tonight? Am I on the floor? Am I sleeping at 10 o'clock because I have a structured routine that puts me to bed at 10? Or is it sometimes 11, 12, 1? All of these sorts of things play out and make for a stressful environment. So what it affects, and what we see it affect mostly and a lot with our young males especially, is on their ability to self-regulate. That is, have self-control, that is, manage their emotions, manage change, and participate positively in a school setting. It looks like this in a classroom, the ability to sustain engagement in instruction. It also looks like difficulty managing social interactions, conflicts, disappointments, things that we can't account for, like a typical day often throws at us. A schedule change even can trigger students that are under stress and trauma in a negative way. We frequently see in our male students triggers that escalate students to one of three behaviors: freezing, fleeing, or fighting. And we typically see it, especially in our males, flight or fight. So we have a lot of cases of students that escalate to what we call crisis in our just in-house school language, but basically disruptive behaviors that trigger into either property destruction, a flip of a desk, a tear down of a bulletin board, a throwing of the schoolwork that they're engaged in, or physical aggression that mounts in peer fights. Sometimes, assault with no or minor, very minor injury, but that sort of behavior plays out when students that are under stress or trauma are triggered. And it happens at a high rate in high poverty settings, even at the elementary school level. What I've learned most in this 2 years is that the start of this work are really conversations like this, because we have a large number of adults that are not necessarily trauma, stress informed. And I'm not talking about just adults, stakeholders outside of the school, even amongst educators in the school. Teachers spend a lot of their time learning about pedagogical approaches. How do I best teach division of fractions? How do I best design learning experiences that will help my students grasp certain content or concepts? Very little in my district and at my school at this point in time is geared around helping teachers, educators become trauma informed so that we can develop the skills, the tools, the mindset, and the response to students. But it also plays out in the families and the parents, who are also not necessarily stress or trauma informed. I had a conversation just this week with a grandmother who said, Kevon just needs a good old grandma discipline. And so, in actuality, it's, so grandma, yes, his property, that he got angry and tore down that bulletin board, and that is not an appropriate response that we want him to have. But that's signaling that there's something much more. And no one really, we're still beginning the conversation about what stress and trauma, what that impact has on students, and that's a real, it's something real to acknowledge, it's something real to plan around and support students around. So what we begin to do is we begin in my school community to just become that, trauma informed, and engage our caregivers and families and parents around stress and trauma and what to do with their students and with their children about it. And one pilot that we were really proud of last year, as Brandon mentioned at the beginning, was partnering with Bank Street. And so we engaged families in the attempt to raise awareness and essentially inform them, build capacity so that there was more of a sensitive approach, that parents are ready to accept and recognize that, hey, maybe that traumatic experience that we know child A experienced and went through is having an implication, and we do need to accept that maybe treatment or individualized modifications to their instructional program is the right course of action, and not just, you know, traditional grandma love. And same with our teachers. We partner with Bank Street to help teachers really get a key understanding of what the student experience may bring and how to be responsive to that. And one of the best tools that came from this experience of beginning to become trauma informed was what we call a strength-based approach to working with students. And that simply means, instead of targeting on the deficit, Kevon's disruptive behavior, that we're actually looking at what are Kevon's strengths, what are his interests, what does he excel at, and let's build his support around those. So Kevon takes charge. He has the strong personality. There's a little leader inside of Kevon. So instead of only building supports around stopping disruptive behavior, let's get Kevon connected with our peer mediation program or our junior recess coaches, and let's leverage that when we need to have conversations about leader-like behavior, or to engage him in school in a way where he is connected. At the end of the day, we've learned that we need to be a buffer in the school for the stress, because the stress is real and it exists, and a lot of times in the school setting, we don't have control over what's happening outside of the school. But we can be a buffer, and if we can engage students around their strengths, around their interests, and create a positive setting for them, we can kind of buffer that stress and channel support, treatment, therapy, the things that they're going to require through through that lens. And that's been our biggest work to date. We're really at the infancy level, I would call it, in terms of understanding this work. But we feel like conversations like the ones we're having, great research like is being shared by the experts here, really is helping to inform practice and shape the direction in the way that we approach this work. And thank you for your time, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.